At the very end of last year, a Palestinian worker was crushed at a checkpoint in the West Bank as he was trying to enter Israel to go to work. And this issue of workers and checkpoints is obviously very troubling. We'll be speaking with Ronnie Perlman. She lives in Jerusalem. She's the Jerusalem coordinator of Mahsam Watch, and Mahsam in Hebrew means checkpoint watch. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
One aspect of this, the checkpoints were covered by regular Hebrew TV, Channel 1. They had an amazing video, not about the checkpoint where the man was crushed, but about the Bethlehem Checkpoint. And tell us about that and what reaction that video had in Israel.
Well, it was quite amazing that the regular TV channel would address this issue, because the whole issue of Palestinians and the occupation is something that Israelis do not like to face.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons that we try to organize tours to take Israelis to the occupied territories and see for themselves what's going on. And as much as we are trying, we haven't brought thousands and thousands of people, only a couple of thousands. So it's a very difficult issue. It's most Israelis do, in that sense, the whole occupation project actually has failed, because for the Israelis it's a place where they don't go. They don't know anything about it. They know there are settlements, and they would mumble and grumble sometimes that it costs too much money. But they don't connect this issue with the idea of occupying another people.
Mm-hmm.
And for many people, the idea of making peace sounds like this. I'm prepared. I love peace. I want to have peace. I'm prepared to even for our government to leave occupied territories, but they don't want. They say they want to throw us into the sea, and every time that we try to negotiate, they do something. They send rockets. They just don't want.
Mm-hmm.
And look at Hamas.
Now, what about this particular segment? Was this something that you pushed Channel 1 to do, or they did on their own?
Unfortunately, when something tragic like that happens, it's newsworthy.
Mm-hmm.
So every now and then, newsworthy items, unfortunately, reach the public television.
Mm. And one of the people in that video says if the Israeli people could see what is happening, they would do something. Well, they presumably thousands and thousands did see that. Was there much of a reaction to what they saw at that Bethlehem checkpoint?
No, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely not. Because, as what I told you, the cognitive dissonance, dictates to people, I am good, I want to make peace, and we don't have peace because of them.
Yeah. So, all right, so that was the Bethlehem checkpoint. The person who was killed was at the Al-Taiba checkpoint, and he was actually the second person crushed at that checkpoint in 2014. How is that possible? I mean, what are those checkpoints like?
Well, the thing is that all the workers have to enter Israel at a certain time. The checkpoints are not designed in a way that should really give adequate service to the clients who are people who have permits and are entitled to enter Israel for work, but they are very crowded and people have to squeeze through very narrow gangways to get to the checking points. And if there is some upheaval because things are happening too slowly, then people are. I have seen in my visits to the checkpoints, I have seen once or twice people who were crushed, not to death, but very painfully, and older people who just come to the checkpoint when they see that there is a long line, they just leave because they are afraid to be crushed.
Yeah. Have you been to that particular checkpoint, Al-Taiba?
A long time ago, yes, I have. But I know what it looks like.
I mean, the picture that we have looks like just a big cage.
Yes, and then there are pictures. You also have pictures of Ramallah, and then you have to consider how come that the checkpoint, which is between Jerusalem and Ramallah, where every journalist who comes to cover the conflict comes to Jerusalem and goes through the checkpoint. Why is it so? Because it could so easily happen that for 3 hours in the morning, instead of 3 checking booths, there would be 10, right? And then after 10 o'clock, it could be an empty checkpoint, because all of this happens between 4 a.m. and about 8 a.m.
Now, your group, Mahsam Watch, when was it created? Who's in it?
It was created in 2001. It was started by 3 women who suddenly realized that until then it was the army and the Palestinians, and that nobody saw what was going on, and there were news kind of seeping through the networks that sometimes violence happens at the checkpoints, and then they spoke to their friends, and I was one of them too, and we started this organization. And we document violation of human rights at the checkpoint.
I understand it's all women in the group?
It's all women.
And why is that?
We felt that since men serve in the army, that maybe the discourse that could develop between the soldiers and men would be too conflictual and confrontational. So we felt that our female discourse maybe is more moderate in that sense, right?
Now, I've been concentrating on the issue of the workers and thousands who are given the right to go into 48 Israel. What about Pardon?
Okay, you said 48.
Well, yeah, it's hard to, the vocabulary sometimes gets touchy.
Right, okay.
But the question is, what about organizations? Have unions tried to help? Has Histadrut? What about Palestinian unions? Have they tried to deal with this issue of the checkpoints?
Absolute zero. Absolute zero. There is the trade union, the official Israeli trade union, does not deal with the workers from the occupied territories. There are voluntary volunteers and NGOs who deal with issues of, violation of human rights or work rights or whatever rights of Palestinian workers.
But doesn't the Histadrut
There's a hotline.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't the Histadrut get some money from the workers who go into Israel, but they don't help them?
No.
Mm-hmm. What about, American unions? Did they say anything about this that you know of?
Well, it's a very intricate and complex issue, because why at all do they bother to come and work in Israel?
Mm-hmm.
One thing is that Israel has helped a lot to destroy civil society in the occupied territories in Palestine. That there is very little work, that it's very difficult to create thriving businesses in occupied territories because we have so many rules and limitations on import and export and all kinds of rules that make it very difficult. And with all of that, Israel is a developed industrial country, and people earn a much better salary, and the motivation of these people is to ignore all the difficulties that they have to go through in order to get a work permit and work in Israel in order to build a house, in order to improve their living conditions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they are very, very afraid of losing their jobs. They want to keep their jobs.
Yeah.
And so they definitely will not unionize, and very, very rarely there's been a strike by Palestinian workers because they are so grateful to have a job.
I did read there was some talk that there had been a strike in December before this terrible crushing to death. How big was that?
For a couple of days, Palestinian workers were striking about the conditions at the checkpoints, and then things went back to what they were.
Mm-hmm. My last question is the mission of your group to try to get conditions at the checkpoints better, or do you take a position that the checkpoints should be abolished, or is there something different?
Well, you asked a very loaded question. We are extremely, extremely aware that we are some kind of fig leaf for the occupation because, the military can say we are the most democratic country. Look at peace activists whom we tolerate at the checkpoints and all of that, right? Mm-hmm. So that we are concerned with the conditions at the checkpoints, and we do complain, and we do bring up issues either about getting about the whole administrative process of getting a work permit, or about the physical conditions at the checkpoints. But we, our logo says Women Against Occupation and for Human Rights. If we are against occupation, we are against checkpoints.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We absolutely do not buy the idea that the checkpoints prevent terror. We are behind we claim that the checkpoints are yet another way of controlling Palestinian population.
Well, this has been fascinating. I really appreciate you talking to me.
Okay.
I've been speaking with Ronnie Perlman from Machzam Watch. Thanks for listening.